According to one of the entries on this list, the Euros is harder to win than the World Cup. And although that is an extremely qualified opinion by someone who's won both of these competitions and more, I personally don't agree with that sentiment. Just thought I'd make that clear before those funky gum flapping and far from fully functioning freshy freaks that are the founding fathers of the Messi fan club foolishly start firing up and flashing their pitchforks. Having said that though, the European Championships still does have its own lineage and prestige, and needless to say, there have been numerous players over the years who took the world by storm in Europe's premier competition. And here is the best of the bunch, as these are the 7 greatest players in Euros history. Let's roll on. Now, unlike my usual lists, this one will go back to a time before 2004. It will just be ridiculous not to. But just not all the way back. Because for those who don't know, the first 5 editions of the European Championships only included 4 teams each. And yes, while that technically does still qualify as a tournament, I'd like to qualify the lack of qualified participants in those tournaments as an excuse to disqualify them from my list, because well, I also haven't watched any of those early tournaments. I don't qualify as being old enough to. Does that make sense? Do I give a qualified shit? So yeah, this list will not consider players pre the tournament in 1980. And on that note, honourable mention, Lev Yashin. Winner in 1960, runner-up in 1964, possibly the player of the tournament in both those editions, hell, possibly the greatest goalkeeper of all time. And he misses out because he was born too early. Such is life, eh? But still though, let that take nothing away from this man's contributions. After all, he's probably the greatest goalkeeper in the history of this competition too. Well, either him or... Number 7, Iker Casillas. As weird as it is to think of a goalkeeper being the best player of those great sides, you may forget this, but running a tight ship at the back was very much a key part of Spain's success in those 3 consecutive tournaments. Hell, all 4 of the knockout games of the 2010 World Cup finished 1-0. Well, these man them were stingy. And as far as the Euros, well, after the disappointment of 2004, Iker Casillas went on to concede not a single goal in the knockout stages of the next 2 consecutive tournaments, keeping 3 clean sheets in total in 2008 and 5 in 2012. And while some of you may say that that's not all that hard to achieve in those all-conquering Spanish sides, keep in mind that you do have to be a certain type of goalkeeper and have certain qualities to even get a chance to get picked in those systems. Then I don't think there's any question that the man who lifted all 3 of those cups for Spain sure had those qualities and had them in abundance. Number 6, Michel Platini. He made it on this list despite only appearing in 1 tournament. That should tell you at least a little about the enormous impact he had on that tournament. Scoring in every single game, including 2 separate hat-tricks in the group stages, Euro 84 belonged to 1 man and 1 man only. Like bro, he's the 2nd highest goal scorer in Euros history from that 1 tournament alone. And bear in mind, he wasn't even a striker. Crazy. Not sure what happened to him since though. I believe he opened his own church since then and now preaches about the dangers of greed. What a stand-up dude. Number 5, Pepe. Yes, this Pepe. And I'm sorry, but how has this gone under the radar for so long? Like yes, we all know who the king of Portugal is, and yes, more on him later, but Pepe is now getting ready to play in his 5th European Championship, and no word of a lie, he was the best defensive player on his team in all 4 of the other tournaments, and in about 3 of those campaigns, one of the best defenders of the tournament regardless of nation. And also remember, not only did he score the winning goal on his debut in the competition, but he was also probably the man of the match when Portugal beat France in the final all those years ago. But as is the case for the majority of his career, his brilliance as a defender is often overshadowed by his aggressive football psycho image. And let's be honest, a lot of the time it was his own doing. Like seriously, what is he doing? But try to look past that when you're assessing his abilities being an asset to his teams. Because for whatever team he played for over the years, Pepe was always one of the more reliable performers on the big stage. And in no big stage was this more evident than the European Championships. Number 4, Marco van Basten. Much like Platini, Van Basten is on here mainly due to his exploits in one particular tournament. But unlike Platini, he not only played in the following edition 4 years later, but was easily one of Holland's best players there too. But of course, this is mostly about Euro 88. Starting the tournament in disappointing fashion with a 1-0 defeat to the Soviet Union, Marco Van Basten got the ball rolling with an amazing hat-trick in the following game, turning Tony Adams inside out, then outside in, then inside out, then outside in, then inside again. To rehab you go, my friend. It was brutal. And from there, the Dutch went on to lift Euro 88 with Van Basten right at the peak of his relatively short career, scoring a very late winner against arch rivals West Germany in the semis, and that volley in the final, which happened to be against Soviet Union, the team that beat them in the opening game. Circle of life right there. Why couldn't you do that?
Number 3, Zinedine Zidane.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I've said this before, but Euro 2004 was the first tournament that I saw in its entirety. And very vividly, I remember England's opening group game against France, where we were leading going into the final few minutes. And I won't lie, I was gassed. But I also remember my dad kept telling me something to the effects of, "It ain't over till it's over. Don't forget, France have the best player in the world." And sure enough. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Look, if you don't know what happened next, go look it up. But just please don't come back to me with it. Because I'd much rather talk about the tournament 4 years prior to that one, because Jesus. So Euro 2000 is usually looked at by a certain generation of fans as the tournament with the most overall quality across all the nations. And among all the big hitters like Figo, Beckham, Henry, Del Piero, Raul, Nedved and so many others, when it was all said and done, it was Zinedine Zidane that was the name on everyone's lips. This was Zizou at his mesmerizing best, and his performances throughout that campaign, particularly the semi-final against Portugal, is as good of a classic number 10's display as you'll ever see. And while I do believe the greatest big game player ever is someone who'll appear a little later on in this list, I don't think there's ever been an elite level footballer whose legacy has been defined more by the big games than Zinedine Zidane. And on top of his exploits in 2 different World Cups, if you look at just how easy he made it look in the European Championships, it's not hard to see why. Number 2, Xavi Hernandez. Sometimes, just sometimes, football isn't really that hard to break down. Case in point, the Spanish teams who dominated football in the late 2000s and early 2010s were known to 1. Have the vast majority of the ball in every game, and 2. Not really have a clear standout player. So how do you judge who was the best player from those teams? Easy, the one who had the ball the longest. Ain't rocket science, mate. And honestly, I'm only kind of messing. So I guess because his game didn't really include anything eye-catching or extraordinary, Xavi's importance in those teams is pretty understated when compared to people like Fernando Torres or Andres Iniesta. But in truth, he was easily Spain's most important player in both Euro 2008 and Euro 2012, especially the first one. And it's hard to say they wouldn't have, since these men popped up ballers of this mold with mad frequency back in the day, but had Xavi not acted as the glue that held everything together, Spain may not have had the success they did end up having during those days, with, as I said, Euro 2008 going down as his best showing. A tournament where he ran pretty much every game, scored the opener in the semis, and quite fittingly provided the assist for the winner in the final. Before then going back to the final 4 years later and providing 2 assists this time. The first player ever to do so. Says it all really. Maestro. And number 1, Cristiano Ronaldo. Because of course it is. Most caps, most minutes, most goals, most assists, 2016 Cup winner, 2020 Golden Boot winner, soon to be the first player to appear in 6 editions, arguably the greatest player of all time. Said it before and I'll say it again, it's him. It's always him. And that is that. Agree or disagree? Beats indifference. What do you think of this list? Is there anyone you'd have here that I missed out? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Till next time, you keep rolling.